Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience. I'm here tonight with my full review of the Topping E50 Dac and L50 Headphone Amp Stack. These were loaned to me by Apos Audio and they currently sell for the E50 Dac is $199 and the L50 amp is $169. Apos does have a deal where if you buy the stack, both the amp and DAC for $369, they do throw in an RCA cable, and if you buy the stack for $409.99, they throw in 6.3 millimeter balanced cable, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes because that's a little bit unusual. So I've never reviewed an amp DAC that uses 6.3 millimeter TRS for the balanced connection, but I'll show you that and explain it a little further in a minute. Anyway, the DAC. The DAC uses an ES9068AS DAC chip. It has a total harmonic distortion rating, and this is by Topping, of 0.00009%. So that is just an outstanding number, and I mean, equipment up until the last few years just didn't have distortion levels that low, so these are incredible numbers. It processes PCM, DSD, and MQA files, and it is a headphone amp and can be used as a preamp, and it does come with a remote. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, it is balanced, but it does use 6.3 millimeter TRS connections, and I'll show you that in a minute. Anyway, the headphone amp is, it actually has a bypass mode where it bypasses the signal from the DAC straight through it when it's turned off. So the amp itself can't be used as a preamp. The volume control doesn't affect the output of it, but if you turn it off, you can use the volume control of the preamp or the DAC and use that as the preamp. This also, this actually has a total harmonic distortion rating of 0.00006%. It's rated at 3.5 watts per channel into 16 ohms, and it has 3 gain settings. I'll roll in a little closer here and show you both of these, show you the front and back. There's not a whole lot to see on the front of the DAC. If I get the light just right, you might be able to see that there is a spot you can touch to turn the unit on and off, and it has a large display which you can see in the photo behind me on the monitor. Anyway, on the back, you have, first is your power input here, and that's 5 volts DC. And this does come with a USB cable to power this, and it has your typical USB-A connection at the one end. You just hook it up to USB charger, and then it has this connection at the DAC end, which plugs in right here. And I want to talk about that a minute because I'm actually a little bit concerned about this, because the amp and DAC, here I can show you both at the same time. The amp and DAC both have the exact same power input connection there, but the DAC runs on 5 volts DC and the amp runs on 15 volts AC. So I'm a little bit concerned because if you've got these cables coming from and back somewhere, and you know, you've got the two of them sticking out here, they both look exactly the same. Here, I can show you, they both look the one coming from the 15 volt AC transformer. So I'm guessing, unless there's some sort of protection circuitry inside of this DAC, if you mess these up, switch them, and plug 15 volts AC into this, which is intended for 5 volts DC, I'm guessing you could do a lot of damage. Possible, very possible, there's protection circuitry in this that will protect it from any damage, but I don't know if there is or not. So anyway, I just wanted to address that. It's a little bit of concern, and if you do have the two of these, be careful, because like I said, this runs just from a USB power supply, 5 volts DC. So anyway, show you the rest of this. You've got your USB input here, and it does come with a USB cable. You've got your optical input and your coaxial digital input here. So you've got 3 digital inputs, and then you've got 2 analog outputs, your RCA and your balance. And like I said earlier, the balance is 6.3 millimeter TRS. Okay, when I first got this, I just hooked it up with some RCA cables, hooked the amp to the DAC and used it that way. But I thought, you know, it's possible I might be getting more out of it if I use balance. Well, I didn't have any balance cables like that. This is the first device I've come across or reviewed that uses 6.3 millimeter TRS. So what I did, I wasn't going to go buy, APOS didn't send them for the review, so they didn't really send it as a stack. They both came in separate boxes. So anyway, I wasn't going to spend the money to buy 6.3 millimeter cables to connect this, which you know, because it's a loaner unit and it's going to go back. If I bought it, you know, then yeah, I would do that. So what I did is I had a couple of identical 4-foot long headphone cables that were 3.5 millimeter TRS, and I had a bunch of these adapters laying around. I'm sure anyone with headphones has a ton of these laying around, 3.5 to 6.3. So I just put an adapter on each end and did it that way, and it seemed to work fine. I mean, this might not be ideal. This, as a headphone cable, probably doesn't have as much shielding in it as a connection cable, but it did work fine, and both units sounded fine, and no, you know, background noise or any hiss or anything like that. So I think it worked out okay. So anyway, let me give you a look at the amp here. On the amp, it starts out, you've got your first switch here is either off, balanced input, or single-ended input. You've got 3 positions there. Then you've got your next switch, which is your gain control. You've got low, medium, and high gain. And then you've got a full-size 4-pin XLR headphone output, which I really like, and I still prefer those over the 4.4 millimeter. And it's got a 6.3 millimeter single-ended output, and then you've got your volume control. On the back, you've got your 15 volts AC power input, and while I'm at it, I'll show you the transformer. It actually comes with it's a wall transformer, but it's very heavy and very substantial. This thing's got to weigh probably 1.5 pounds, and it's actually heavier than either of the units. So, you know, this isn't a lightweight power supply. It's pretty heavy. I do have one complaint though. The cable on it is only about 4 feet long, and I ended up with trouble. I wanted to plug this in down behind my rack, and then the cable didn't reach. I didn't have enough room, so I had to shuffle some stuff around and move the amp and DAC to a different place so it would reach from my power supply. And it would be nice if this had a 6-foot cable on it instead of 4 feet. It just came up a little short. And then it was the same thing with the USB cable. It's only 4 feet long. Also, the one used as the power supply on the DAC. So back to the back of the amp here. You've got your pass-through here, which basically passes through the signal from the DAC if you turn this unit off. And then you've got your inputs here. You've got 2 sets of analog inputs, both the balance, which is 6.3, and then your standard RCA single-ended inputs. And I do like that you do have 2 inputs on this, so you can, not only hook up this DAC, but you could hook up another, analog source into this, whatever you wanted to, whether it be another DAC or whatever. So, anyway, I forgot to mention the remote. It does come with your standard tapping remote, and it you can pretty much get to all the functions through this, and you can even dim the display on it because it is pretty bright. So you can dim that down or even turn it off, and you can lower and raise the volume of the DAC. This does come with the DAC, not the amp. And you can actually sort of use this as a volume control, because what you do is just, you can set the volume on the amp a little bit louder than you're probably going to listen to, and then drop the volume with the DAC going into the amp and adjust your volume there. So, you know, if you're sitting back in a chair, whatever, away from the units, you can control the volume with the remote that way. It doesn't actually control the amp, but you can control the volume through the DAC. So anyway, getting to the equipment I used in this review, I used two different inputs, or my source. The first was a CD transport from Cambridge Audio, and then the second, that was into the coaxial input, and then the second source was a USB, through the USB input, and that was my HP desktop computer, running Windows 10 using Media Player, and I was playing CDs that had been ripped to the computer in WAV lossless format. Headphones I used while reviewing these. I used, the first one I used, or one of the first I used, was the Hi-Fi Man HE400 SE, which is very power hungry, and that was more of a power test, and that was, I think, the only headphone I tried that I actually kicked this up to high gain. Everything else, medium gain, was more than enough power. I also used, for my actual sound test, I used primarily the Hi-Fi Man HE1000 Stealth and the Hi-Fi Man HE1000 SE. And then also I tried it with the ZMF Atrium, which is a 300 ohm headphone, to see how it matched up with that, and it did very well. And the JM Audio XTC2, which is a headphone I got in a month ago maybe, which actually got the award of Headphone of the Year this year. So anyway, getting to the sound. The first thing that really struck me with these is just exceptional clarity and detail. Just extremely clean sound. As far as the tone balance, I would say it's almost dead neutral, but just very slightly on the warm side of neutral. I notice it in the mid-range. It's got just a little bit of warmth to it, and that's comparing to like the Topping's flagship DAC, that I reviewed like a year ago, the D90 SE. Extremely clean and detailed, but in my opinion, just a little bit on the cool, little bit on the dry, sterile side. And I wasn't crazy about that, and for that reason, and I don't have that still to compare to directly, but from memory, I would say this is slightly warmer and a little richer in the mid-range than the D90 SE. So anyway, just tiny little bit. I'm not saying it's a warm DAC or warm headphone amp, but just a little bit on the warm side of neutral, which, you know, for most people is going to be ideal, I think. The soundstage is very wide, it has pretty decent depth, and it has excellent separation of instruments. And the amp has enough power for every headphone I tried, even planar magnetics, and even like the HE1000, the 1000 SE, and the Atrium. I was using the medium gain setting on all three of those. The only headphone that I used the high gain was the 400 SE, which is a headphone that if you don't give it enough power, sounds really flat and lacks bass and lacks dynamics. So this thing seems to have plenty of power for just about any headphone I've thrown at it. I don't have something extremely hard to drive like the HE6 or 6 SE, but anything I did use, all the planar magnetics, I had plenty of power. Anyway, and one thing I did like, and I think I mentioned that, is with the remote you can get to all the functions, including the filters. I think there's 3 digital filters on this, and I will admit that, like every other Topping DAC that I've reviewed, I can't hear the difference. I'm at the age where I know I can't hear above 15,000 hertz, and I believe that the digital roll-off filters are only affecting frequencies above that. I did have a friend try this. She was using the HE1000 SE headphone, excellent headphone, and I ran through the different filters, and she did hear a difference. But she's 30 years old and I'm 60, and I just didn't hear the difference. Some DACs I can hear a little bit of difference in the filters. This one I can't. Like I said, I think it's just up in frequencies that I don't hear anymore. So anyway, I did want to do some comparisons of this. I did compare it to several different things that I had in at the time, and first I wanted to compare it to the E50 Dac, which I did review a few years ago, and I actually bought it because I was so impressed by it. And the E30 currently sells for $50 less. It's $149, this is $199. And the E30 is extremely clear and detailed, but just a little, I'd say it's neutral. Where this one is just a little bit warmer, and I do like this one better because of that. It's got a little bit more warmth and a little bit richer sound and a little bit more weight to the music. So the E30 is excellent, but this I do prefer slightly. It's it's just a little more on the musical side to me. Just that little bit of extra warmth helps, in my opinion. I compared this to the Benchmark DAC 1. And I will admit that this is like a 12-year-old DAC, but this was state-of-the-art 12 years ago. This was a $1,000 amp DAC combination that was rated an A by Stereophile magazine, and known as one of the best DACs around. Well, that was my original headphone amp and DAC, and I've had it for years, and I just thought I'd give it a comparison. And to be honest, in a lot of ways, this outperformed the Benchmark, I thought. I think it beats the Benchmark in clarity and detail. I think it has a little bit larger soundstage than the Benchmark, and it's just a cleaner, more focused sound. Where the Benchmark, I think, beats this out a little bit, as the Benchmark has a little bit, slightly warmer sound, a little bit more of an analog sound. But this is pulling out more detail than the Benchmark. And like I said, that was a $1,000 amp DAC, like 10, 12 years ago. I compared this to the iFi Zen DAC, and the Zen DAC I have is the original model that sold for $129. This combination beats out the Zen DAC in pretty much every way. It has better clarity and detail, it has a larger soundstage, it has better separation, and the amp has a lot more power, can drive harder to drive headphones a lot better. But the Zen DAC is only $129 in its defense. It's the newer version, I think, is $189 or $199. I would say this combination actually compares better to the Zen 1 signature and the Zen DAC or Zen Can signature, which I reviewed, I don't know, maybe about a year and a half ago. And I don't have those here to compare directly, but from memory, I would say that that's a comparable stack. The Zen 1 signature and the Zen Can signature are a comparable stack to this in both sound quality and power. Those do, though, the combination of the two of those goes for about $650. I compared this to the Hi-Fi Man EF400, which is a combination amp DAC. And that currently sells at $399, so that's right in the same ballpark as far as price. So that was my main unit that I wanted to compare this to. Okay, any of you, I do have it sitting back here on the desk. I don't know if you can see it. It is larger, it is heavier. I would say that this combination, the topping, slightly beats out the EF400 in detail and clarity. It's just a little bit cleaner sound. Where the EF400 beats this is the EF400 being an R2R DAC. To me, sounds like it has more depth to the soundstage, better layering and better distance to it, where they both have very good width. So it's pretty close. They're not that far apart, and I wouldn't really say one is better than the other. Like I said, just a little bit cleaner, a little bit more detail out of the topping. The one big advantage the topping does have, though, and my complaint that I've always had about the EF400, I love the sound of the EF400, but I don't like the fact that it has no analog inputs. It is a DAC and amp built into one unit. It has no analog inputs, and it has no optical or coaxial digital inputs. It only has USB, so that limits it to my desktop where I have my computer as a USB source. So about the same price. They kind of balance out, you know, as far as the topping's a little bit cleaner, more detailed, where the Hi-Fi Man EF400 I think has a little more depth of the soundstage and has more power available. The EF400 will power anything without a sweat. So anyway, and then last I compared this to the Burson Conductor 3 reference, which is an amp DAC combination also. Excuse me just a second. Okay, I will admit it's not really a fair comparison because the Burson is a $1,750 unit, but this actually does hold up pretty good in comparison to the Burson. As far as the DAC, to me the Burson is a really great headphone amp with a built-in DAC. And as far as the DAC, I actually think I prefer this DAC. I think it's slightly just slightly more detailed, and it does have a little bit larger soundstage than the built-in DAC in the Burson. But the Burson is an incredible amp, and even though this is a great amp, the topping is, the Burson still way outdoes the topping as far as amps. It's got way more power, and it's just got more control, more authority, more weight to the sound. So but as far as the DAC part, I think the topping is as good or better than the DAC in the Burson. But in the Burson, we're looking at technology that's a few years old now. This is a little newer. But once again, the Burson does have the better amp of the two. So what does it come down to? Do I recommend this? Absolutely yes. In fact, in my year-end reviews, even though I hadn't done my full review on these yet, I awarded this DAC the best bang for the buck DAC under $500. It's just an outstanding DAC, and for that price, and in fact I would say even just a few years ago you probably would have had to pay $1,500 for an amp DAC of the quality of these, with the clarity, with the detail, with you know, pretty decent power and all that. I mean, at least $1,000 a few years ago you would have had to pay to get this kind of sound. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Is there anything I don't like about it? Not crazy about the 6.3 millimeter TRS connections. That, who knows though, that might become popular, it might become the standard, and everyone will have 6.3 millimeter cables laying around, but I don't. Right now it's just kind of unusual, and I wasn't equipped for it, didn't have the proper cables. I realize that there's not room, there's just no room to put full-size XLR connections on this. Hi-Fi Audio has gone the other route and used 4.4 millimeter Pentacon, which cables are available 4.4 to 4.4 or 4.4 to full-size XLR, which makes it easy to hook up to a full-size amp that uses XLR inputs. But this, as far as I know, there's no way right now. I don't have the cables, and I haven't seen the cables to go from 6.3 millimeter TRS to to full-size XLR. I'm guessing someone will come out with those cables soon if they're not available already. My only other complaint is the cable or the cord on the power supply just being a little bit too short at 4 feet. I wish it'd be 6 feet, but other than that, absolutely impressed by these units. The sound is incredible for the price, and my bottom line is basically you're on the verge of high-end audio here at a budget price. I mean, you know, $369 for the pair. It's kind of getting at the high end of what I would consider budget gear, but you're getting the sound that was the sound quality that would have been considered high end just a couple of years ago. So still at least upper mid-fi sound for a budget price. So very impressed, highly recommended, and that's about all I have to say. So I'm gonna wrap up this video. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And you're welcome to join us at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. It's up to 6,000 members. And I think it grew like 500 members in just like, I don't know, not too long, like 10 days recently. So growing like crazy. You're all welcome over there. Once again, thanks for watching my video.